Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Dan Rosanova. I'm a recovering BizTalk consultant. And I'm here today to talk about really about the cloud and messaging, and really this is more of a personal journey for me that I'm going to talk about. Clemens will talk a little bit more about our product stuff. As I mentioned, I worked a lot with BizTalk in the past. Some of you might know me from that time in my life, which was quite a long time of it. And my goal today is to talk about my personal journey through messaging, really, which started even long before BizTalk, and through BizTalk into Azure and the cloud. So I guess a more entertaining title for this would be a play on Dr. Strangelove and how I learned to stop worrying and love the cloud. So for anyone who doesn't know about my background with BizTalk, I wrote a book on BizTalk. I love BizTalk. BizTalk's one of my favorite things still. I really love BizTalk, like a lot. And a whole lot. I guess I spend a lot of my life doing this. I wrote a book about it, which is like the worst use of time mankind has ever invented, is writing a book. But it was fun, and it's still a pretty good book about BizTalk. And you know, I'm very happy. I'm actually happier than anyone else here, probably, for the improvements, for the roadmap, the stuff, the investments that Microsoft's making into BizTalk. I think it's really important for us. I wanted to talk a little bit about why I like BizTalk so much and my journey. So my journey was that I really loved BizTalk because I knew it. I knew it really well. It was a tool set I understood. I worked with a lot. I understood how it worked internally. I understood how you could use it to solve problems. I knew that I could look at any problem in really an enterprise environment, which is most of my experience, banking, insurance, trading, and know how I could solve these problems with BizTalk, or which problems I should not try to solve, although that one took a lot longer to figure out, admittedly. So I was like the Johnny Appleseed of BizTalk. I don't know if that makes sense over in this part of the world, but that was a person in the US 300 years ago. You can guess by his name. He spread apples around. I've had some time to think in my 2 years at Microsoft now. Last week was my 2-year anniversary there, about my past, about the things I've done in the integration community, the contributions I've made, the ideas I had, and sort of the work I did and the architectural concepts that kind of guided me along the way. And I want to talk about that for a little bit before we talk about Service Bus and messaging in the cloud and all the fun stuff that is Azure. And I want to start off by talking about some of the things I got right. You know, I got some things wrong, I can admit that. And there's some things I tried to keep in mind all along through this journey. I want to start with those, actually. So when I think about like my journey through messaging, and this really isn't BizTalk specific, it's not Microsoft specific, it's not Azure specific, there's that these, and actually most of these aren't even technology specific, is to embrace simplicity. So like that is the first and probably most important lesson I took through my career in building integrated systems and distributed systems, is that really anyone can make something complex. It's a lot of work to make something simple. And whether that's simple communication or simple technology or simple visualization, they're all good examples of the same thing. The next is about framing issues clearly. And this is both, again, there's technology aspects to this, there are interpersonal and communication aspects to this. One of the things that makes integration so hard is that you're not only trying to jam together technology that probably doesn't want to fit together, but with the right tools, you can probably make it. But you're also having to tie together teams or companies that really don't want to integrate, that don't want to talk together. So, you know, that's the same challenge in both those ways. The other is to be lean and to keep moving and to be relentless. And this is something where I'll talk a little bit about how I think Azure really helps us here, because it helps us get to minimum viable product quickly. It helps us get to something working quickly and gives us an avenue to keep progressing over time, rather than kind of making these big boil the ocean investigations and things like that. You can't be afraid to try new things. This can get really easy when when I was really doing a lot of BizTalk, I looked at everything with my BizTalk eyes on, and that's how I saw the world. I know with the Romanesco has been in the markets a lot in Seattle lately. Someone I know calls this space broccoli. And I just thought I'd use it because it's not something that a lot of people see, I guess. And then the last tenet is really to sort of respect people as individuals and their opinions and their experiences, all the value that everyone brings to a company, to a team, to a society, and diversity. And not just diversity of background, but diversity of thought and opinions. So these are all kind of important things that sort of frame places I in my journey, did good things and bad things. The first thing I got wrong about messaging, and I wrote that book, so like you can go read what I wrote. I can't change it now. It's in hard copy a few places. Centralized schemas. This really seemed like a good idea. For years, I fought this beast, and I thought it was a good idea. Centralized schemas seem like a good idea, and so do centralized economies, right? History has proven to us that neither are good ideas in the long term. Sorry?
So the dagger in the heart of BizTalk.
Yes. And another one was that I got wrong, that this one's tough too, is always mapping at the port level. This is something I really espoused. This is actually kind of a problem with BizTalk, or a problem I never figured out how to solve before I stopped trying. And that's because it didn't make it easy to do. So when you're always mapping at the port level, one of the things something I've learned at Microsoft now, which is a very interesting, different role, because now I'm up here instead of there. And now instead of working on the projects I work on to integrate stuff, I work with a ton of customers and see what they're doing. And what I realized in retrospect is you don't always want to know what's in the message. You know, like in Service Bus and Event Hubs, we never look inside the message body. And that's actually probably a good idea. You know, the big thing I'll drive to in a second really leads that point home. So this is another thing that belongs in the dustbin, which I actually happened to find another photo that I took in Alaska that matches the previous one. So another thing I got wrong was compensating for bad line of business application design by doing more things in the middleware. Like, this is really tempting. This is how you get big orchestrations. This is how you get really complex integrations. And the temptation here is because you can make fast progress. You can get some stuff done because, you know, SAP is such a pleasant thing to work with and is designed so well. But you can actually get around it a lot. But the problem is you're just masking the problem. You're not addressing the fundamental issue. So you're getting some short-term gain and some long-term pain. So why was this so wrong, right? There's too much overhead. There's overhead that you're having to deal with in the integration space. It invites some of the worst behaviors. Something like centralized schema management. This is a great place to have committees and bodies and approval steps. And if you want to slow something down, and this gets back to my whole lean thing, if you want to slow something down with a group of people, set up a committee, right? Go to any big company and have a committee. Nothing will get done. I mean, if you don't want to get stuff done, it's perfect. And the problem is that middleware ends up doing all the work and, you know, taking up more resources. And there's a value perception issue that then people don't think in an organization that middleware is delivering value because it's costing so much. Well, it's doing a lot, and people just don't necessarily see that. And you can kind of get by it. A lot of people in our community here do that by just being, you know, really good at what they do and by being agile and being very hardworking. But again, you're doing something potentially that's just fundamentally flawed. The next thing is smart endpoints and dumb pipes. Like, this is what Martin Fowler said about microservices. And Martin Fowler was big in the patterns world. You know, he still is. My book was called BizTalk Patterns. I spent a lot of time thinking in patterns. But this is like an anti-pattern is what we're talking about, is when the middleware becomes the logic, you're not doing microservices. You know, so the focus that I see now from my day-to-day role and from the Azure services I work with and am responsible for are really about the dumb pipes. So the smart endpoints are logic apps, they're functions, they're the API management, they're the other things we're here to talk about. But the dumb pipes are a separate piece that's important, and you know, I think this plays to a larger, better story about how Microsoft's coming together on this stuff. The big thing here is that microservices aren't ESB. ESB is actually like the anti-pattern for microservices. You know, so like, and believe me, I'm having a therapy session here. This is a big revelation in my life that's taken me a long time to get to. So I appreciate your patience with this. So there were also technical aspects to problems I had with BizTalk. You know, and one of them is a fundamental issue, and BizTalk's really a distributed system, and it's really good at that. You could use it to make a very complex distributed computing or grid computing framework, but it's got a single point of centralization that you can't get past. And that's using DTC to do that, and that's the message box. This brings a whole bunch of things with it. You know, some good things, some bad things. All of them scale problem things. Because we'll get to numbers in a second, but my concept of scale, even from working on stock exchanges, changed dramatically in the last 2 years. And the scale thing's hard, because I bet there are ways, if I fought long and hard enough with BizTalk to get past this. Maybe it'd be things like having, you know, multiple installs of BizTalk on the same hardware. So it's not just multiple message boxes, which won't do much because you need a master one, but to have just multiple of those. So sharding somehow through that. I don't know, I never got to it. Might be possible, be interesting to see. The things I got most wrong though, and this one kind of hurts the most, is that I think I left behind a lot of solutions that organizations that had to live with them just weren't capable of doing. So, you know, you can deliver something really sophisticated and really powerful, but at the end of the day, if the people you left it with can't use it, can't get value out of it, can't continue to grow it, you know, it'll atrophy. And, you know, you can do this in BizTalk. BizTalk's awesome because you can do anything with it. You can change assembly loading, you can override stuff in the CLR, you can do great stuff. You know, you can do things like set up having too many paths in and out of a solution or sources and destinations for data, and you can make things more complicated than they probably need to be. So ultimately, where I ended up with all this was pushing the rock up the hill, right? This is not a fun place to be in, and sooner or later, you kind of just give up. And this is the struggle of trying to do everything in the middleware. You'll die. You'll do it forever. So now I want to talk about some things I got right, because it wasn't all bad. The things I did get right were separation of concerns. I think I found a model that worked really well with that for BizTalk. Compartmentalization of logic, minimization of lateral dependencies, that was a good one. Staying between the lines. This, I think, and all of these I think are actually still applicable with all the Azure services you're starting to use and that we're talking about this week. And an example I like to use is like the expression shape. Well, there's an expression shape and you can put whatever code you want in it. It's probably not a good idea. Like, to me, that was a code smell of BizTalk, was go look and see if an orchestration is just all expression shapes. Then why is it even there? You know, what value is it adding? So that things like small orchestrations, limiting the size of these pieces. I liked in the expression editor how you couldn't resize it, how there was no autocomplete, how it made it hard to work with because it constrained how much you wanted to work with it. That was actually smart. Another thing, MSI deployment, like the deployment model for BizTalk is really good, and continuous integration. I think I got both of those pretty well with my BizTalk stuff. So this is a shameless plug for the book again. I can basically buy a pint for every copy that sells. So I haven't had a beer in a while, so. Now we'll take a brief pause for dramatic effect. I'm past my BizTalk rant, and now we can move on a little bit. Hold on. I have a sip of water here. Again, I love BizTalk Server. I warned my wife about this one. I just got married recently. And I'm like, I'm going to use a photo from our wedding in my talk. And she's like, well, I better look good in it. And I'm like, yeah, you do. So, I mean, I love it for a lot of reasons. I made a small fortune off BizTalk, really a lot of it off of what is today an ARM template, like installing and configuring BizTalk. That used to be my bread and butter. It was great. So I liked it because it's a mature and stable tool set. You know, you can rely on what it's doing, and it's not going to, you know, change underneath you and break stuff. And you can do most of the things you needed. And I think most of all, my history in XML goes back much further than my BizTalk history. BizTalk did XML correctly. XML, I think Microsoft destroyed XML with .NET. I work at Microsoft, and I'll say that. Because like it made assumptions to data contract serializer that weren't true in XML. BizTalk honors XML really, really well. Like things like orders, unless you explicitly set sequence in an XML schema, there is no order. And BizTalk respects that, and it works with that. .NET doesn't. So like there are things that broke, and Java didn't either. Java didn't even try. So BizTalk really did do XML right. The problems were just around XML itself, and then the pendulum swung, and everyone wanted to go JSON and no schemas, and now it's coming back, and people want Swagger, and they want schema for JSON, and it's like, well, what happened there? The other thing is that BizTalk was and still is superior to all of its competitors in every way. And I worked with Tibco, I worked with MQ, with WebSphere, with Web Methods, all those things from the 90s with web and net in their name. All of them were just inferior products. So, I mean, I'm pretty confident to say that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about why I love Azure even more. So real quick, who here actually uses BizTalk? Hands up. Whose companies uses BizTalk? Okay, keep your hands up if you're using the messaging feature in BizTalk. That should have been everyone. So, the trick question. How about if you're using mapping? Okay, and if I get to things where you're not using, put your hand down. Orchestration, pipelines or flat files, EDI, rules engine. No, don't put your hands back up. You have to be using all of these. This is a reductive process, okay? Or you'll ruin my point at the end. Bam, my favorite thing. This is one of the things I got right that I mentioned. Okay, now look around at how many hands are up. All of you are paying for their features. You are subsidizing their features. So this is the 1% of BizTalk right there, okay? The people who had their hands up. They're getting all the benefit. So that is kind of a problem with BizTalk, is it's one tool set. By nature, it's how you can't change that now. I mean, you'd be pretty angry if you had to start buying these things separately. But when you look at Azure, it's a very different model. So I just pulled these this morning through pictures. You're not meant to see what they are. It's what's public on like some marketing page for Azure. But there are over 70 services now. So, and you pick and choose which ones you want. You don't have to use them all. You know, and it's not just services. Some of them are IaaS type services. Some of them are infrastructure or SaaS services. So you get the whole continuum. Now you can see that what we're doing is we're giving you a tool set where you're going to pick what you're going, and I say we, Microsoft, big Microsoft we, is that we're giving you a tool set that ranges from on-prem to totally in the cloud, like in a SaaS model, where you can choose what the trade-offs, what you need to do and want to do are, and you can focus on what's actually delivering value for you. You know, when we look at this, the blue parts are the sort of the cloud provider's responsibility. In that case, that's Microsoft, and the green parts are your responsibility. You know, and when you're on-premise, I mean, you're using BizTalk on-prem, that's everything. If you stand up BizTalk on IaaS, well, you've just knocked off some of those things, and some of them that are hard, like physical security. Like physical security is a hard problem. You know, that's why IaaS is so big, is because it's removing all of this stuff, and as you go up this PaaS stack into SaaS, you're getting to just higher value. You know, so you're doing less maintenance and work and getting more time to focus on what you're trying to achieve rather than the tools you need to achieve it. Now, you can still do things in Azure you shouldn't do. And this is my dog, Seamus. That was Halloween. That's actually my Halloween costume a few years ago. I used to have a bottle of wine with that costume. After I drank the wine, this seemed like a good idea. So I put the costume on Seamus and took a photo of him. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So the cloud is really changing the way that you as customers of our stuff and other people's stuff are discovering software and using software and deploying solutions and integrating stuff together. This is really different from how things have been in the past. If you look at the way things used to be, it was this big process that, like when I think about most of my BizTalk career, you know, with customers, it started with software procurement cycles, it started with hardware procurement, installation of hardware, installation, configuration of software, probably some virtualization. I mean, right now we're already talking about like 3 or 6 months of time before any value, you know, and big upfront investments. And then you could actually start your project. So this was a very different world than where we're in now, where you can be like, hey, I want to try BizTalk with Oracle, and you can stand those 2 VMs up in a few minutes. And if you don't like them, you can turn them off. You know, when you think about what the real revolutionary things that the cloud is doing, it's things like shadow IT. That's how Salesforce got popular, was not selling to IT people. It was selling to salespeople. And by the time IT realized what was happening, it was too late. They were already in the door. Dropbox is the same way. And you know, if we don't make sure that we as IT organizations are still fast and agile and providing value for our greater parts of our companies, then that's what will continue to happen, you know, and it will get chaotic. Now I'm going to talk about what we've been up to in the service bus world, and this is kind of the fun stuff in the Azure world. Turns out we've been up to a lot in Azure messaging. We are running at a clip of about 350 billion messaging operations a month. There are 2 million queues and topics in Service Bus in production right now. Daily ingress volume or daily data volumes above 300 terabytes. We have one customer cluster for event hubs, which is not even a large one, that is doing sustained 1.5 gigabytes per second of telemetry. Like that, and we have 100 of these things, and that's one of them. 2.75 trillion events into Event Hub last month. We've actually gone higher now, but we'll talk about that number in a little bit. 60,000 active namespaces. Those 2.75 trillion events coming into Event Hub, they're triple replicated, they're durable, and actually people read more than they write. So they read about 2.4 times. Our request rate right now actually averages over the last 7 days 4.49 million requests per second. So let's think about that for a second. 4 million, 8 million, 12 million, 16 million. You know, by the time I'm done with this talk, we're going to be doing like the trillion events already. And all that with like a 50 millisecond average latency send time. Our 99th percentile on that is 100 milliseconds. So we've broken another threshold for us, and that was that we are at 100 billion events a day. I've been told that I can't violate copyright stuff, so any resemblance you see to this to a character in some movie is purely coincidental. That's your imagination. So as I mentioned, like our clip right now, so over the last 7 days it was 2.71 trillion requests into Azure Service Bus and Event Hubs. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. I already mentioned the second rate. This one's a fun one too. We had a 99.9984% success rate on those. But that still means we had 44 million errors. Okay, let's think about that for a second, right? Okay, we had almost 5 nines of success rate, and we had 44 million errors. How many people in this room do 44 million anything a week, right? And this is our error rate at almost 5 nines. The real lesson here is that there is no 100% at scale. There isn't. And you just have to deal with that. That's life. I mean, if you want to go fast, that's how it is. One of the other things we've been working on is premium messaging. I think Clemens will talk more about this, so I'm just going to skip through this actually. It's about resource isolation. It's about consistency. It's not necessarily about speed. It's about predictability. It's about predictable performance and predictable pricing, things that enterprise customers want. Basically, you know, Azure is in an inflection point where we're really maturing as an offering, as a platform, and we're less about just trying to have like customers on board and more about trying to have quality services for customers. Service Bus is a great service, but in the public, you know, shared standard model, it's a multi-tenant platform, so your mileage may vary, and this is something that's designed to address that. And it's not really about speed, it's about predictability. That said, everyone likes to go fast. Let's talk about some numbers real quick. Our last tests, and we will release benchmarks when we GA this, which is soon, are that you can do about 3,000 messages per second into a basic queue on one messaging unit. And you can purchase 4 of those messaging units in a namespace, so you can do the math. You can do pretty fast. Considering these are all durable messages, 12,000 a second is pretty fast. Anyone in this room ever get BizTalk to do 12,000 a second? Yeah, I didn't think so. I tried, believe me. So we're nearing GA here, and I mean, don't get me wrong, that's not a knock in BizTalk, it's just a fact of like 1 cluster versus 100 clusters. So one thing I do want to make sure we're thinking about, again, it gets back to our error rate stuff, is let's not repeat the mistakes of the past. Be realistic when you're looking at cloud services or even on-prem services and you're thinking about well, how big can one thing get? We've had a few customers say, well, 12,000 a second's not enough. I want 100,000 a second in a queue. And it's like, do you really? Like, does that really make sense? That seems like a really big basket to put all of your eggs in. Like, is that really what you want? And to think about things like the cap theorem. I like to bring this up now because one of my customers brought it up. And I was like, wow, that's a really good way to describe the problem. And it turns out it is a great way, so great that someone wrote a dissertation on it. And the cap theorem states that it's impossible for a distributed system to simultaneously provide all 3 of these guarantees, so consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. So this is important to keep in, this is not limited to the cloud. This is for any distributed system. So this is like just reality we have to deal with. When people say they can't lose anything, it has to be up 100% of the time. I mean, Airbus and Boeing make airplanes that aren't up 100% of the time, and they spend trillions of dollars on it. So why do you think you're going to be able to do better with some, 3 guys in a garage and some computers? You're not. So, think about what's really important. Think about what's really possible. Be realistic in this stuff. Real quick, I want to run through now to tie everything back together, sort of just the big tapestry that is the services in Azure. Just looking at a couple of them, I like this infographic because you can think about, processing events in Azure, think about the stages things go through from event production, which is going to be applications, devices, all sorts of things, through collection, through event hubs, because that's where everything goes, right? Anyone in here who's using Azure is by proxy using event hubs, you just don't know it. Eventually we'll start telling the truth about all that. So you'll see a lot more of it in your own diagnostics in Azure very soon. Other services like Stream Analytics, who here has used Stream Analytics? Anyone? Oh, it breaks my heart. Oh man, got to do it. And then, as you get down towards this, after things like transformation and stream processing, things like long-term storage and things like presentation action, so we're going to get back to things like Power BI and logic apps and stuff like that. So the things to keep in mind here are that we got a lot of stuff going on in Azure, and a lot of it is about stitching stuff together. It's going to be different than in BizTalk because it's not all in one box, so you are going to have a learning curve to figure out which services to use. We're focused on building the services first, so we're not as focused on making it as easy to explore as it maybe needs to be. Real quick, before I'm done here in a little bit, I want to bring up some stuff we've been working on in Event Hubs, and we wrote our own native Java client on top of Proton.j. We originally assumed that people would just be cool with using like Apache Proton, and it turned out that's not the case. So people want something that's easy to use. I don't blame them. The client's public, you can go play with it yourself. I got some time to work with Docker recently, which was quite fun. That was the first time in a while that I've gotten to play with something totally new to me. And actually Azure Container Service with Docker Swarms and Event Hubs was awesome. Like the stuff you can do with it, the speed you can deploy, it's cool stuff. And that's part of why we built native Java clients, is to address that need. And I guess on that sort of capacity side, an email went out late last night, early this morning, about an announcement we had, which is for Event Hub's dedicated capacity offering. So for people who need a whole lot of Event Hubs, this is a single tenant model for very, very large scale customers. It's the same service as Event Hubs, but it's totally dedicated, and unlike Premium, which is dedicated or reserved parts of the resources, this is completely dedicated, like big blocks of servers and stuff. Because this is a big thing, we were able to remove a lot of our limits, so we don't have constraints on message size as much. You can do 1 megabyte messages. You can do a lot of small messages. We take off all the counts. It is a flat fee model. It's a fixed price per month model. You don't pay hourly charges or message charges, so it's very easy to predict your pricing. It does require an EA and a 3-month committed purchase. When we designed it for being able to supply about 150 megabytes per second of telemetry per one of these capacity units. You can buy up to 7 of them. What we've learned in production with our first private clients is that each one of these capacity units can do somewhere between like 350 and 500 megabytes per second. So your pricing depends on your EA, but I mean, this is not something that's meant to be like, oh, I want to play with this thing and see if it works. It's the same Event Hub service. You can do 100 megabytes in public on Event Hubs. Go play with that, and if you're ready to make a real big commitment for like long-term type stuff, this is the option for you. This is some pretty serious scale. If you're interested in it, contact me or Clemens. We'll get you hooked up. And then kind of to bring this all together, because I like thinking in pictures, that's a cool one, isn't it? Microsoft is changing. We're changing a lot. You can see it in this conference, actually. You can see how we are collaborating internally and changing internally, as well as changing our external services and offerings. We're enabling our customers to do more. We're enabling you to do more in less time. Our goal is with less upfront cost there, because we know that the world has changed from how it used to be. And we do know that we have to help you work with the assets you already have. Like, there's no, hey, just burn everything down and start over in the cloud. That's never going to happen. That's okay. The thing I really want to end on is something kind of fun. I'm not doing any demos today. This one I hope people here will go and play with, though, and try out for themselves. Think about something like this, is that you have thousands of messages per second coming in from somewhere. It could be anywhere. It could be web logs. It can be whatever you want it to be. And you can use a service like Stream Analytics to do a SQL query with a 5-minute tumbling window on that stream of data, and do a count so you can find values that are outside. This might be errors in the HTTP logs. Like, you can do some pretty simple stuff pretty quickly with this, and that's why Stream Analytics is cool. And you have a big pipe coming in, you have a stream processor that's doing stuff in there, you're pushing those alerts, which is really what they are. You're not processing every event in that, you're reading them and calculating on them, but you're taking action on the few events, feeding those to a queue, and then triggering a logic app off that. So you can do all sorts of fun stuff after that. These are the types of scenarios you can actually do, and honestly, seriously, give it a try. If you've not used Stream Analytics, it is like a 5-minute start. It's faster to get started with that probably than with Event Hubs. So give it a try. You could do this whole thing without writing a line of code and probably have it buzz your phone or do one of the demos that the Logic Apps team is way better at than I am. So, I mean, this is pretty cool, valuable stuff. I would really encourage you to play with these new toys. The big thing here is that keep in mind, this is about a journey for you. I told you about my journey. I've shared my past and where I am today and where I'm going now, sort of in my views of stuff. And now it's the time for everyone here to think about their journey, and to think about where you're going to go with what you have, what your legacy and your environment is, and the path that you need to get to. Thank you for your time today. I'll give Clemens a couple extra minutes, and if there's any questions, I'll be around the rest of the day and tomorrow. So thank you.